What's going on, guys? So we're back for yet another episode of Godzilla Smacks the Marvel Universe with the Godzilla vs. Avengers one-shot. But just know, much like the other Godzilla Marvel stories we talked about recently, this story is very different from the Godzilla Avengers crossover from the late 70s, or even the Iron Man Godzilla crossovers. Because these one-shots are doing something new, with it taking us from the 1960s to the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, all which we've covered on the playlist, to where now we're about around that 2004 era, which means we're now dealing with the new Avengers. So just kind of keep that in mind as the story unfolds and we get some of these references here and there. And now with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so going into Godzilla vs. Avengers, this starts out in Astoria, Oregon, in the aftermath of a very intense encounter with Godzilla, where now Maria Hill, who was director of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time, she's letting the new Avengers have it, because much like the Maria Hill on Earth 616, this Director Hill was also against the assembling of the new Avengers, so she uses the footage of the aftermath of this encounter as a way to prove her point as to why the new Avengers aren't such a good idea. But starting with Cap, they all just come back at her like, hey, you're blowing it all out of proportion, like the place is damaged but it's not destroyed, like come on, we saved lives. But also, you can tell just by looking at Wolverine, bruh, that they had a rough time when all this went down. And as we jump back to the events that took place and how they unfolded, Tony's just like, considering what we were up against and the size of the threat we encountered, I think we handled the situation quite well. Though really, with how this went down, this was Godzilla letting Fin Fang Foom know who the true king of monsters is. Cause as soon as the new Avengers got there, Godzilla one-shot the Quinjet, which is when Cap realized that they were outmatched and unprepared from the start. So from there, for the most part, Spider-Man went after civilians as far as getting as many people as he could to safety, while Iron Man went directly for Fin Fang Foom, since he had already faced them before and he figured that matchup just made sense, since he had the experience. But looking back on this, at one point Luke Cage is like, this ain't the kind of experience that I want, as he's nearly stepped on by Godzilla. And Luke even says at one point, just because I have unbreakable skin doesn't mean I don't feel pain, and I don't have unbreakable bones made of adamantium. And right when he says this, Logan's just like, I still feel pain too, bub, as he's just getting scorched by Fin Fang Foom. And in the case of Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, right now she's like, it would be nice to have either the Hulk or Thor here. But it's like, come on here, there's a reason why they both have their own one-shots in this whole thing. But even with that being the case, there are a couple things that I want to circle back around to when it comes to how all these different decades are being handled. But we'll come back to that. But instead of either of those guys showing up, the Avengers end up getting help from Jet Jaguar. But only Tony really knows who Jet Jaguar is, so he gives everyone else here a brief breakdown by telling everyone it's okay, this is Jet Jaguar, a robot built and designed by Goro Ibuki to handle situations involving kaiju just like this. He's definitely here to help, and that's made pretty clear when they see Jet Jaguar steering both Godzilla and Fin Fang Foom away from the town and the nearby civilians. And so of course, this huge brawl between Godzilla, Jet Jaguar, and Fin Fang Foom, it had some of the heroes just standing there and watching, like with Cap trying to figure out if he's good or bad, Wolverine looking like, well, where did this dude come from? While Spidey and Luke are trying to figure out what the whole Jet Jaguar name thing's about. But I will say, for any of the classic Jet Jaguar fans, just know in this story, this isn't the actual Jet Jaguar. And we'll get into more about that in a minute. But as this fight goes on, this huge robot, who they still refer to as Jet Jaguar, gets the upper hand on Fin Fang Foom and tosses him into the bridge, into Spider-Man's web, only for Godzilla to approach behind him, while both Iron Man and Wolverine are basically like, here it comes. But with how this story is being told by the heroes to Director Hill, so she can get an understanding of what actually went down, this takes us back into the present moment where the heroes are passing around Jet Jaguar's head, which is how we find out that it wasn't actually Jet Jaguar, with Tony saying that it's a nice knockoff, though it's not actually him. But while Director Hill's waiting to get an explanation, the heroes just go back and forth, like with Spider-Man asking again whether it looks more like a jet or a jaguar, or Spider-Woman not being able to focus because Wolverine smells like burnt hair and skin. So eventually, out of frustration, Director Hill slams the head on the table just before we see the group responsible for this new Jet Jaguar, with it being 3 young individuals who call themselves Kaiju Chasers United. But for Maria Hill, who really doesn't care about that, she just calls these guys the Kaiju Busters. But as it turns out, one of the members of this group is a girl named Bonnie Ibuki, who happens to be the niece of Goro Ibuki, the original Jet Jaguar. So she ends up explaining to Director Hill, as well as the new Avengers, how her and her friends used her uncle's technology and his original design specs to build their own version of Jet Jaguar, so they can help against the kaiju threat like her uncle did once before. And at first, this has Hill like, okay, you expect me to believe 3 kids built a mega mech that can grow up to 150 feet tall, without the use of pin particles, which I mean Cap finds to be impressive. So Bonnie tells them here that she can explain everything, as she goes on to say, we wanted to do more than just sit back and watch helplessly. While monsters like Godzilla wreaked havoc, we decided to build a new model of Jet Jaguar from material we salvaged. And when it was done, we were ready for action. And now the whole time they were doing this, Bonnie, she was confident it would work, though her other two friends, not so much. But eventually they got it up and running. But after hearing this, Director Hill, who again is trying to piece all this information together. So for her, she's like, okay, you guys put together this version of Jet Jaguar from salvaged parts, and you used it to fight monsters. But then she asked them, like, did you guys even test this thing out to make sure it worked? And I mean, in their defense, it did work up until the moment that it didn't, which from here takes us back to the moment in the story where Iron Man and Wolverine was like, look out. Because when Godzilla caught Jet Jaguar slipping, he ripped his arm off just as Fin Fang Foom was getting free from Spider-Man's webs, which then led to a very disrespectful combination of attacks coming from Godzilla, starting with him beating Fin Fang Foom with Jet Jaguar's arm, only for Godzilla to then pick up Jet Jaguar, which for some reason gave Tony the idea to get Spider-Man to web Godzilla's hand to Jet Jaguar, which I'm gonna tell you right now was not a good idea, because nothing was about to stop what was coming next. And it's funny because you see Fin Fang Foom hold up his hand and say, no hurt Fin Fang Foom, just before Godzilla smacks him with Jet Jaguar's body back over towards the bridge. And it's a close call for the civilians once again, though this doesn't destroy the bridge. Not yet at least. But coming back to the present time for a moment, it's here where Director Hill has Fin Fang Foom in containment, and she's brought along the new Avengers as well as the Kaiju Chasers United as a courtesy while she's trying to get answers out of the big guy. And there's this force field holding him back, so Spider-Man is like, is that gonna hold him? While on the other hand, Spider-Woman's like, it'll hold, besides I think his legs are broken. Because once again, this is showing us the aftermath before we go back to what actually happened. But just before Director Hill gets to ask Fin Fang Foom anything, there's a second here where Tony's basically like, is it me or does this dude look like he about to cry? Like it's really building up that suspense to showing us what actually happened. Because in this interrogation, they eventually get him to talk, and it's kind of hilarious how it even gets to that. But this starts with Tony telling Director Hill to ask him why he attacked Godzilla. So Hill's like, that's what I'm trying to do if everyone would stop talking, only for Bonnie to ask Iron Man, how does he know that Fin Fang Foom is a him? And right there, Hill was like, what? Like, what are we doing? And her friend backs her up. He's like, for all we know, Fin Fang Foom could be a female of the species. And that's where Spider-Man's like, it's a him, because he's wearing shorts and not wearing, you know. And Spider-Woman's like, what, a bra? It's okay to say bra. And Logan's just off to the side like, bra. And this whole time, the faces that Fin Fang Foom is making is like, can you believe these people? So Director Hill asked nicely for this conversation to end, only for Bonnie's other friend, Sebastian, to just come out and say that he's never seen Kaiju wear any kind of clothing. And Luke Cage, man, this is where Luke Cage is like, Man-Thing doesn't wear anything to cover his Man-Thing. Then he's like, wait, is Man-Thing a Kaiju? Which again is Director Hill like, shut up, please, just stop it already. Only for Fin Fang Foom to finally speak and say, it's not fair. So Cap asks him what's not fair, which again has Hill like, you know, I'm supposed to be asking the questions. But Foom answers and he says, Fin Fang Foom is king of monsters. Which from here takes us back even earlier to tell us the story of how this started and how Fin Fang Foom messed up. Because when he saw Godzilla, he approached and he was like, why are you here? And he went on to say, you not king of monsters. Fin Fang Foom is king of monsters. And the whole time Godzilla paying him no mind. So Foom got angry, like I know you ain't just gonna keep walking. So he chases behind Godzilla saying Fin Fang Foom is talking. Do not walk away from Fin Fang, then boom, bop, bap. Godzilla just smacks him 3 times with his tail, which is wild, because it's like the Godzilla version of what Tony Baker was talking about in those Skibbity Pap videos. And when we jump back to the present for a really brief moment, Tony's just like, that's a sad story. And Luke just looks down like, that's pathetic. And when Spider-Man says he just slapped you around with his tail, at first I thought he was going to keep going and be like, oh, and you ain't did nothing? But Hill points out here that this all started over bragging rights, of which Fin Fang Foom is still not letting go of. And even with him still saying here that he's the king of monsters, Hill is just like, okay, keep telling yourself that. In the meantime, can someone tell me what happened to the other king of monsters? The one that isn't locked up behind the force field, which again takes us back to where things were after the new Avengers showed up and Jet Jaguar was destroyed. And the truth is, Godzilla just didn't stop until he was good and ready. Because as much as the Avengers tried to fight him off, it really wasn't doing much of anything. But because at one point Tony was like, oh, let's try to steer him towards the water. When Godzilla eventually decided to leave, Tony was basically like, look at that, my plan worked. And Spider-Man's just like, well, I'm gonna count it as a win. And Tony's like, yeah, thanks to my plan. And as Godzilla leaves, some of these guys are just glad that it's over, while you have others like Wolverine, who's still talking trash, which is probably because his brain is half baked at the moment. But yeah, this pretty much wraps everything, because from here we just see Bonnie and her team meet up with the new Avengers, who at this point are just like, wait till we explain this to Maria Hill, which is where the story started. But also I gotta say, after reading this issue, I'm not so sure that these stories are connected anymore, which is what I was referring to earlier, because some of these one-shots make references to the others, like the Godzilla vs. Spider-Man issue that made a direct reference to the 70s Godzilla vs. Hulk issue. But back in the Hulk issue, we're also told that Tony Stark was dead. So yeah, I'm not sure if that was the plan at one point and something changed, because each of these issues have different writers, so who knows who was told what. But either way, I've enjoyed the 10-year jumps that each of these stories have been doing, but now with Godzilla vs. Thor coming up, who knows what's gonna go on with that. But nonetheless, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, and let me know your thoughts in the comments, because for me, this issue might be the weakest link thus far. I'm sorry, because after what we got in Godzilla vs. Fantastic Four versus Hulk, versus Spider-Man versus the X-Men from the 60s on through the 90s, I just felt like those hit a bit harder. And I'm not saying that this one needed to do the most like the Spider-Man issue, which brought in other events from that time period, because it would have been a little weird for this to lead into a version of Secret Invasion. But to me, this just felt more like a Fin Fang Foom punching bag special. And that might just be me. Let me know what you guys think. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.